Past. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We've got some great turnout. Julie and I are so excited to go over this topic with all of you because for many reasons, we've been a part of the good, the bad, the terrible, and the amazing of leadership development programs at all sorts of companies, big, small, service, product, manufacturing, et cetera. And we're really passionate about making sure that our material sticks. We're not one and done, and we take into account the full change management methodologies into everything we do to ensure that people adopt them and use what we're teaching in the long run. I've obviously learned a ton from Julie over the last handful of years about change management. It's fascinating. Works on kids and husbands.
It does very, very well.
We also work to ensure that people have new skills that they can immediately apply in all of our webinars. So we definitely want you to think about what we go over and what you can, start using immediately after this hour. But also knowing that to have a full program with leadership and looking at the larger picture, we want leaders and employees to be successful all of the time. Understanding expectations, right, of all training, knowing their roadmap, and helping companies realize that there are development opportunities for any role, right? And coaching to help everyone be successful, right? You can be a people manager or an individual contributor. And so this topic is super large, right, as everything we approach. So we pulled a couple of our few key messages to review with you today. So you can obviously reach out afterwards if you'd like any more. This is Julie and myself, Julie on the left, me on the right. We've had the privilege of knowing each other for a handful of years, almost 10 at 4 different companies. We love golf and Ann Arbor, as you know, my same joke, different Big Ten schools.
Go Big Ten football. I'm so excited.
And more importantly, we love what we do. We love partnering with business leaders to get down to the root cause. We love finding the problems. We love asking questions to get there. And we love being able to take everything from our past to create unique solutions, meeting businesses and owners and individuals where they at, both with maturity and experience in that industry. So we're not cookie cutter. So we're pulling everything from operations, project management, continuous improvement from our past. We've done stints in HR to create those personalized solutions. And so we can teach, we can speak, we can coach. Again, all solutions are customized to those that need it, or that want it. So jumping into all of our content now.
Absolutely. So all of us has really been just kind of thrown into this remote world now. On whether you've been doing it before, like I have, I've been working remotely actually since 2006-ish. The majority of my team has not been in the same location as me. Now, it was a little bit different then because I was still sitting in office and they were still sitting in an office, but we were still trying to manage all those projects virtually and try and work together. Now it's a totally different environment where there's just this weird hybrid mix of people working from home, working in their offices, working in all sorts of different locations. I had one friend who took her family camping. They were working from the campground for that week while their kids still went to daycare, which I thought was absolutely genius. But we're dealing with this now. It's just the most bizarre situation. So there's a recent study that was done actually in August that 60 to 80% of workers today are part of at least one virtual team, which is crazy to think about. So whether or not we want it, the world is changing. And our role as leaders is absolutely evolving, and we're caught in the middle of this culture in transition. So we know from a change management aspect, the quicker we can help get ourselves through this change, the quicker we can help lead others through change as we go. And thinking about future generations here, you can run a small company from a phone. Trust me, Jen and I have been doing it. The QuickBooks app on my phone, the Zoom app on my phone are probably the two most important things that I have out there. And even my husband and I had a conversation about it the other day as he was approving essentially IT tickets from his phone from the couch the other day. Like, why would you need to go back in some of these cases? And businesses are starting to make those decisions going forward on whether or not people need to come back into the office 100% of the time, or what that hybrid workforce might actually look like.
And Julie and I actually have a friend who is going to be getting an RV for the last 3 months of the year. working remotely with 2 kids in school virtually. So it's
I mean,
possible.
that just sounds like fun. Absolutely. So a couple different concepts on this one, where there was a study that was actually done pre-pandemic, that was done by Stanford over 2 years, that shows the astonishing productivity boost of people working from home. And, you know, it's really interesting as you go through it, because there were a lot of great things that happened from it, where they found people were way more productive working from home, and that they felt as if they had a better work-life balance. They were getting some of their time back from their commute during the day. And, you know, we've got this article pre-COVID, and you're like, sure, that totally makes sense. I would love to be able to do this. I mean, prior to COVID, about 30% of people worked remotely. And now that number is up to about 48 to 60% actually in the last survey that I saw, which is really interesting. So it sounds awesome, right? But only when you actually have the time to train and prepare for it. So that's what we're kind of dealing with right now, where a lot of companies are essentially scrambling at this point to figure out, what do you change in policies? What do you change in procedures? How do you change the competencies for our leaders around to help them lead teams remotely? And how do you take people who were, and this is funny because Jen and I both know these people who were 100% against people working remotely before, and now they're forced into it. There is no other choice but to work from home in some of these situations. So like we said, you have time for it and prepare and train for it, absolutely. But now lots of people who have never led teams remotely before are thrown into this situation. And the other big thing to remember in this case is that change saturation is 100% an issue in these cases. And what we mean by that is that one small change may not seem that big, but when you combine that one small change in with multiple other small changes or a few other big changes, it magnifies the impact of that one specific change in these cases. And we're all kind of dealing with that, especially I've watched it over the last 2 weeks, and I work with a lot of people who have children who are working from home. Monday, Tuesday, they look fine. By about Wednesday, Thursday, they're like ready to be done. And Friday, they're like checked out. And you throw one more change on top of that at this point, and say like, hey, surprise, in-person schooling is now done, or everybody comes in next week. And it's just about enough to drive people over the edge. So change saturation is absolutely a thing to recognize right now.
Mm-hmm. And our kids are in Ann Arbor Public Schools, and change has been constant, right? Every day we get something else. And
Mm-hmm.
I did a really good job, except for 1 week of going with the flow. And I'm back to my going with the flow mantra. And we just got another email saying that they were going to give out school supplies, and they're delayed a week because the shipment didn't come in.
Okay.
Understanding supply chain and transportation, I get it in this case, but you should have seen the uproar in people. That just, of course, it's another week late. Of course they're changing, and of course they can't get anything right. And it's unfortunate because there's so much going on behind the scenes that we need to work hard at trying to understand both sides.
Yeah.
And be patient. Exactly what it says here. Oh, but it's painful. So we have lots of worries, right, that we face today. And obviously the virtual world doesn't help. There's a lot of unknowns. And before I forget, feel free to use the question and answer if anything pops up, if you do have a question. I forgot to mention that earlier. But as leaders, right, do you know what your teams are facing, right? Are we asking them how they are doing? Are they aware of what's going on around them? Or do you ask them, hey, we're communicating, but are we missing the mark, right? Just like the school system, they're really missing the mark in communication right now. But I don't think, I'm not going to go there. But leader, how are you adjusting to all of this, right? How are you changing your style and communications and interactions? And very importantly, survey the team. What do they need right now? Have you given them any tools to be successful, right? And a tool right now might be, $100 to go buy a camera or a microphone or a different desk chair, something to make them more successful at home where they don't have to work at the kitchen table. Because we know when our computer's open in front of us at the kitchen table, we're often checking our email and doing work more frequently, which is then removing us from our lives. So if you've done something now and you've asked and you've given your team tips and tricks and different techniques, then fantastic. Are they working, right? Are they actually filling the problem or solving a problem that you have? And if you haven't given them anything, think about what you want to do next, right? Is it a conversation? Is it training? Is it some sort of interaction? How do you get them motivated? How do you yourself work at not micromanaging, right? Because that's to the point Julie made earlier, for the leaders who were terrified to go virtual because they can't micromanage and they can't look over your shoulder all the time, right? We want to help those people realize that if we can build trust and communicate well and set expectations, there's no need to micromanage because we're all adults here and we all want to work hard. So again, having those discussions, understanding if any additional resources are needed, or possible solutions to help the individuals. And as we face these new challenges, again, what are you doing differently? How will you communicate expectations, right? So removing yourself from the micromanaging, mentality. How are you going to communicate organizational vision, right, with remote work? Did you make a policy or not? Again, have you given them tools? And things change. So how are you building in flexibility with your team to support families, right? I think we've given this example before. If you've got two people, one person works 6 to 2 and the other works 8 to 8 because they have to leave and pick up kids or make sure they can get logged into their Zoom meetings. If they're getting the exact same things done, they just do it slightly different, is that okay? Right? So we have to adapt the way we manage our people and lead them and recognize that it's okay. Knowing at all times that we still have to produce, right? Just like the bottom of the slide says, just because we're at home doesn't mean our quality wavers. So how are you motivating and giving people the skills to do that? And really, most importantly, what about your employer brand? And this should really probably include employee brand as well, because what you do or say says a lot, right? And silence and ignoring and running says a lot more. So addressing it, knowing that we're going to not be perfect the first time, knowing that crisis adds so much organizational complexity, right? I think the current environment of the world right now is just insane, right? It's different for most of us who've, only been alive for 40 years. We've never seen this before, right? So how are we communicating and using our employee voices to help us with solutions, to help us improve? History's shown that only 35% of leaders were in place during the 08-09 recession, right? So obviously lack of experience to deal with the current world forces companies to make mistakes, especially as the economy starts to slow. So how do we build up people, any leader, to be able to handle this, to strategize, to prepare people, and most importantly, take a pause to plan, right? Ask questions and start planning. And thinking about employer brand, Julie and I worked with a company who said a lot and did something. I want to recognize they did do something. Their values were all over the wall. They talked about them a lot during, hiring and onboarding. But once you start working with them, you realize that they're not really using their values to drive motivation, work, and engagement. But this company invests a lot of money, which is fantastic, into recycling, plastic bottle recycling centers and all that kind of stuff, which is amazing, right? They're investing in their technology to produce their goods as well. But they're not addressing the fact that people are working remotely. And they want people to come back into the office, even though their employee survey that they did this summer says that people are in different situations and it adds more stress to them to think about having to return to the office when you don't know where your kids are going to be. You all of a sudden have to pay for care, right? Daycare that you weren't planning on. So again, back to the employer brand, what are you doing to take care of your employees during this time? Yes, it might cost money, and yes, it's going to take time, but it's more important than ever. And so what do we need to do? We need to have a remote policy, even if it's temporary and even if it's fluid and it changes as we go. Creating that and communicating that, right? Here we're focusing on the people, process, structure, and technology. We need to redefine skills, not only for remote work, but for leaders and employees who are performing this remote work. People need to be more adaptable. They need to be able to do multiple things. They are no longer able to kind of peer over their cube and ask a question or shout into their leader's office and disturb everyone around them.
Nobody did that, Jen.
I've never shouted into
Her
someone.
name was not Jen, and it didn't happen to be my office.
To ask a lot of questions. But we don't have those kind of answers surrounding us in a workplace. So I want people on my team who are problem solvers, who are flexible, who are going to be inquisitive to find answers, right? So those are the kind of things I'm going to start building into the expectations of the roles, on my team. And identifying what people need to be successful while being on remote teams. We need to make sure we identify that. And very importantly, focus on outcomes, right? Back to the comment that, it's okay if someone works 6 to 2 and another person works 8 to 8. Do they have the same outcome that was defined as their goal, right? Versus how they're doing it. You're just going to stress people out and you'll stress yourself out. Obviously, focusing on measuring work and investing in tools, techniques, and anything to help people become successful. And a somewhat sad statistic here is that 54% of all HR leaders said that poor technology or infrastructure was the biggest barrier to effective remote working. There are lots of platforms out there. Some are free, some are very low cost to create the environment that we actually are working together. There's also phones. How do we promote people to start calling people again, right?
Even I'm calling people, Jen, and I do not call people.
How do we do that to actually hear someone, right? There's so much out there. We need to take advantage of it. And this is a journey, right? So Julie and I want to try and give you some tips and tricks and some immediate wins, but we've got this program that we've created and we're actually working on with some companies where we are doing some initial training. So leaders have abilities to be successful with their teams. But it's much more than that. It comes down to redefining the skills, knowledge, abilities, and competencies that make everyone successful. And note that this is stuff that we did when we worked in the office. So just because we're remote now doesn't mean that this is all new. This is stuff that we've been doing for years with many roles and many teams. And with those competencies, you can start to visualize the roadmap for someone to grow within a role or possibly move from function to function. That's the cool thing about competencies is you can define a couple that means success for the entire company. But again, communicating that there is a roadmap for people, right? And wanting to develop them. You create excitement that someone's actually going to have a career with you. They're not just coming in for this one specific role and then when they outgrow it, they leave. We don't want that. And then obviously ensuring transparency with surveys and 360s and getting feedback and then wrapping it up with coaching, right? Julie's going through a formal certification process where it's fascinating talking to her, but there's so much in there to help support everyone's success. Multiple tools and questions and things to think about and for any level in an organization, right? Coaching isn't just for, presidents and CEOs. So, and anyone can be a coach, right? So we want to help prop people up with some of those skills, techniques and skills to help their team. So this then segues into the things that we want to give you today to leave with and go home and implement.
I think they already are home, Jen.
Oh yeah, never mind.
You can stay home and implement these.
So we've got 5 main areas to evaluate for opportunity and change. So we've selected a handful. Again, we couldn't get to everything, but we've got trust, engagement, motivation, instill focus, and ensure accountability. And as we go through this, think about what you're doing, right? What you've seen done around you and what you like and what works, and make some notes because that's what's going to reinforce your behavior, when you get out to your teams or your peers or anyone around you in your remote workplace.
Perfect. All right, so we'll just jump right into these then. Thank you, Jen, for taking those 5 main opportunities there. So we'll jump into fostering trust, which is that first component. And that is really one that you're going to be working on both in person and in this remote world but it is a little bit harder in the remote world. There's different ways that you can go through and build and maintain that trust. And it's going to take you a little bit more time because you're having to do it more one-on-one now than you might have previously done if you are all in person, because some of this stuff can be done when you're in group meetings together, but the majority of it now is going to be through these one-on-one interactions. And the important thing to think about this is that it goes two ways. So it's not just you building the trust with your employee, they have to build the trust in with you as well, and they have to trust the rest of the team. Mm-hmm. So it's a unique environment that we're in now because they've had the opportunity to build that trust out in probably a in-person environment at some point, and then it's easier to go to a virtual environment because they've had those relationships already built up. Now you might be adding to your team, bringing in people from the outside, which adds in a different layer of complexity and confusion here. So some of the things that you guys can do as leaders and helping to help your team through, even if you're not leading people, is helping with that relationship building aspects. Schedule more frequent one-on-ones. And that doesn't necessarily mean like leader and employee. It can also be with your teammates as well. Jen is a teammate of mine. I have one-on-one scheduled with her. That's not a leader-employee situation. That is a peer situation. So if you are a peer, schedule some one-on-ones with your peers to make sure that you're maintaining that connection with them as well. Mm-hmm. And allow those times for those conversations to happen that you would have normally had with them if you were just walking through the hallways and catching up with somebody on how their weekend was. It is hard to build a relationship with somebody if you jump right on the call and the first 2 minutes of it is just jumping right into the meeting and you don't even ask the person how they are. I've been on a few of those in the past couple of weeks and they are tough. There's just no relationship building in those situations at all. Go ahead. What was it?
Just focusing on tasks.
Yeah, exactly. So think about establishing that daily cadence, whether it's every day that you're talking with somebody on your team, or if it's every 2 to 3 days that you're pulling your team together, maybe 2 to 3 times a week you're pulling them together. Figure out ways that you can collaborate more as a team. The other best practice you'll see highlighted on there is camera on, and I've got some new statistics here for you just in, and this happened to be one of my favorite questions. What percentage of participants on a conference call are less likely to multitask if they have their cameras on? And your choices were A, 32%, B, 51%, C, 63%, or D, 82%. I'll give you a moment to think about that.
Less likely to multitask?
Less likely to multitask with their camera on.
Gosh. D?
It is D. 82% of people are less likely to multitask if their cameras are on, which is super interesting in those cases. But I was like, so make sure that you've got your cameras on. And at this point, we don't care anymore what you look like. It's good to be professional when you need to be professional. So for those of you I know that you're out there who has a Zoom shirt sitting in their office that I put on when I know I have an important call. My husband asked me when I'm going to wash my Zoom shirt, but it's sitting over there. So I know when I have an important call coming up, I can just pop that one on. But it is important, have your camera on. That is a huge component of being able to foster trust. But most importantly, as you're going through this is no different than if you were in person. If you are telling one of your employees that you are committing to doing something for them, make sure that you follow up on it. If you offered to help, make sure that you give the help on it, because that is the 100% base component of building and fostering that trust. It is your role as a leader to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Some other things on this one too. I love open-ended questions. This is one of those things that I've learned in coaching school of asking questions that are open, and that means that there is not a binary answer at the end of it. It can't be a yes or no or a black or white, that it causes somebody to sit down and think. So some things you can ask when you're trying to foster trust. How can I best support you? What information do you need to be able to make a decision? And what do you like about that idea? Because it is just generally building that conversation into something that will naturally blossom into something more instead of a quick yes or no, or I don't like that, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right, so the next one that we talk about is engagement. And that is where we continue to talk about that a strong team is more likely to be a high-performing team. Now, obviously, again, it's easier when we have a high performing team, when we have people probably together. It's a little bit more difficult once we start to go remote. So the best you can in these cases, do your best to nurture and engage your employees by being that hub that connects them together. So maybe you heard something on one call and you heard a similar thing on another call. Connect those two employees. It's your job as that leader to serve as the feedback point in those types of conversations, because they're not happening next to each other right now. People just can't overhear what's going on at somebody's desk in these cases. So figure out how you can pull those two team members together like you once did before, and find creative ways certainly to offer those different team bonding activities. Some of the fun ones that I think I've seen already, my husband works for a pretty large company. They celebrated their like 100 days of working remote, which I thought was cute because most schools do that.
Yeah.
So we had to find 100 of something to take a picture of and submit. So of course in our house we had 100 golf balls. I wanted 100 puppies, but apparently 3 was enough. But 100 puppies would have been more fun. But figure out ways that you can celebrate and have those bonding activities. I'm working with a company right now we're just brainstorming ideas for the next 3 months to figure out how do we take what we traditionally would have done in the office and change that to remote. And I'll share one of the fun ideas that we've come up with is they've got a contest to figure out the best ways that people are modifying their traditions that they've had with the holidays that have come already and that are upcoming, how they're modifying them due to COVID, and then sharing those with other people. And they're giving out prizes for the most creative ways to keep their traditions intact, which I thought was pretty cool. Like it's a way to get everybody thinking, share some best practices. Some other questions to think about this one, those open-ended questions with engagement. What conversations and communications are you missing the most? Ask your employee, ask your peers what they're missing in those cases. What can we make sure that you're communicating to them? Where do we need to connect more as a team? They might not come out and tell you right away where they need more communication, more contact. So it's up to us to ask them specifics on where they actually need more communication in those cases. And some things might be worked on individually at this point, and they would have been fine when they were in the office environment because they could kind of joke around, ask questions to the people sitting around them. And now we need to ask the question of what projects or initiatives might be better tackled as a team in these cases to help build that engagement moving forward.
That's a good point. Yeah. Can you delegate in a different way?
Yeah.
That gives people, ownership, right?
Exactly.
And that helps, trust as well. And I think, something we've seen is also to drive some motivation and engagement is also, give someone else a chance to lead a team meeting.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing a daily stand-up in front of some sort of status at a glance board, use that as a chance to get someone to lead that, right? Or different people are responsible to update it because it'll motivate them in a different way to get involved. And then they'll also realize, wow, I didn't realize how challenging that was or how time consuming, and they might have ideas for improvement. So many different tactics. And the other one I love, especially with motivation, is selecting a weekly DJ, right? Having, I heard this on a call last week where they drew names at the end of a meeting for the next week's meeting of an individual who got to play their music and pump everyone up.
Mm-hmm.
Safe for work, of course, but I would be intrigued to actually call in early to the next meeting so I could get more scoop on what kind of music that individual likes. I think that, it tells more about their personality and obviously learning more about the team.
I'm shocked you did not have anything spinning when people logged into the webinar today, Jen.
Next time.
All right, tune in next time you heard it. Jen will have music.
But the big thing with motivation, and again, with any role, any company, anytime, is helping them understand the why. Obviously, why is this company in play? Why is your role or why is this function so important? And why is what you do on a daily basis valuable for, the success of the company? And that sometimes it takes some brain and some time to think about, but really driving that understanding. We've both seen this prove successful for people who are answering the phone at 1 a.m., 7 days a week. They knew why they were there, and they were motivated to work hard
Yeah.
because they were constantly reinforced of that. And everyone valued them because they knew they were a direct contributor to the bottom line. Um, you know, other things to do obviously are, to Julie's point, is find different ways to be creative. My neighbor next door leads a team in sales operations for a company, and he'll send them lunch, right? Especially when a new person joins. So everyone's getting their own lunch delivered to their house so they can have a team welcome lunch. They've done happy hours at a local park where everyone brought their preferred beverage and a camping chair, or blanket. So they actually got to see each other in person, still safe. And it wasn't a required to go because he didn't want to force anyone to get uncomfortable. But there were options. And I think one of the biggest ones that we love, and Julie helped reinforce this one for me, was mailing thank you notes. Where's my,
There you go.
So actually getting something in the mail is so invigorating, and it's motivating to pass.
And it's not a bill.
No, it's actual mail with your name on it, handwritten. And I know one of a company I previously worked for used to have these cards throughout the entire building. And at the beginning, I'm like, oh, I don't know, this seems kind of cheesy. The first time I got a card in the mail from someone recognizing my performance was like the sky had parted, the clouds moved, and I'm like, it felt amazing that someone took 5 minutes to recognize me in that personal way. So you better believe I got a stack, and every week I sent one to a different person, knowing that I was passing on that feel good moment. But again, motivating them to continue the hard work because one person noticed. A lot more people noticed, but filling out that thank you note demonstrates that their hard work is being identified, and it's amazing. So another key thing, though, when watching for motivation, especially with trust and engagement, is what resistance are we experiencing too, right? So being aware, keeping your eyes open. We talk about this in a little bit, but it's definitely important not just to watch out for the good things, but to also watch out for opportunities that you might need to address and help in, right? Mm-hmm. One of we have a lot of favorite training modules.
We just love it.
One of our favorite concepts is behavioral-based motivation. And this is another way to get people motivated because it improves their knowledge and their expectations, but it ties it to results. So just like we were talking about the value and why everyone is here, we're starting to build in more definition around what they do on a daily basis and how that ties to results. So if you think about it, every level of leadership has impact on the results, right? One example is that executives influence change and behavior with value definition, right? And defining goals for departments, right? And their expectations. Managers help influence change in behavior, right? By providing input and feedback, right? Again, being the leader, providing some coaching from the side. Hey, this was great. Here's why. Keep it up. Or adjusting behavior when necessary. And then we can better predict our results when we have leading indicators, right? So when we define what people need to do and when we measure when it actually happens, right? It helps to get our results. It'd be a recipe for success, not a trial by fire, right? So we're motivating people because we defined all of this and they know what's up and they can see the winning all along the arrow.
That's fantastic. I love that. And then we jump right into instilling focus. And that is making sure that your team is continuing to focus on the right things moving forward. And I will tell you, this is a topic all over the board right now that people are really digging into. I actually have a couple people that I'm coaching right now that are struggling with this and trying to figure out how they are balancing essentially the independence of leaving people remotely and that amount of oversight that they're giving because they don't want to feel like they're coming off as micromanaging. They 100% completely trust their people and they are getting there, but they still need that same information. They still need some feedback in these cases. And they're either afraid to check in because they don't want it to seem like they're micromanaging. In a lot of these cases, it's just making sure that you're doing it in a way of, hey, we're just filling in our metrics. I just want to check in. I'm scheduling it with you so that you know it's coming. And in a lot of these cases, these people are just making sure that they're almost announcing when they're coming in. So it's not like a last minute, I'm checking in on you to make sure this got done, and not making it feel like an aha, I got you moment, but say, hey, Tuesdays at 2 o'clock, I'm going to be checking in with you all to make sure, and going around the horn to make sure that we've got everything done that we said that we were going to be doing, and that it's not a surprise in those cases, and that everybody is getting it.
Mm-hmm.
It really does feel like there is more checking in now because everybody is remote, but it just doesn't replace the transparency that we normally would have in these cases if we did have it in the office. So what you guys can do as leaders and as peers in these cases is just to make sure that all of the goals and priorities for the team are absolutely crystal clear. What specifically is it that they need to have delivered? When do you need it by? When do you expect updates on it? And make sure that that communication and that subject is even more important than it was when you were in the workplace environment together. Over communication in this case is the key, just making sure that people are crystal clear. I happen to absolutely love using virtual Kanbans or task boards because I'm one who thrived in the in-person environment of having a whiteboard and stickies, so I knew what everybody was working on. I can't tell you the number of projects that we have done with companies in the last 6 months of taking what was on their physical wall in their building and turning it into something that is now virtual that everybody can see in these cases. And I happen to love that. It's super fun. I know Jen does as well, of just taking something that's physical in person and turning it into something that everybody can see now. The other thing to think about is making sure that you're getting all the materials to the team to review and think about questions on before you get to the meeting. So there's so much pressure now, even when you do have your cameras on, to make sure that you're looking and making eye contact with people, which is different than when you were there in the meetings in person. So somebody might hand something out and it was no big deal if you were sitting there doing this during the meeting because they could physically see that you were reading. You can't tell that that's what I have here when I'm on my Zoom screen. You could think that I'm over here like playing Farmville on my phone. You don't know that I'm actually reading through the handouts that you sent me, or that I'm looking over here at my other monitor reading what you just sent me, because there's so much of an impact being put on the eye contact and seeing everybody else on the screen. So whenever you can get those materials over to the team in advance to go through and take a look at, that really is a best practice there. Even if it's just not perfect, you're just sending over a draft. It's better than sending over nothing and then spending, a couple minutes reading through. If that is the only way that you can do it, is right as the meeting starts, give people 2 minutes to read through it. Have them turn their cameras off and just let them take a break, read through it, flip your camera privacy screen down or stop your share, and be able to go through, read them, and start in those cases. Some other questions to think about this when you're trying to work on instilling focus with your peers and employees is, what is standing in the way of achieving your goals? So helping them focus on what might be a priority in those cases. What's your measurement of success so that you know what to expect, you know when to check in? What do you need to be successful? That can help you figure out what tools you need to give them to help them focus on that task. And then ask them, what are your priorities and what's the timeline, so that you know when to check back in and they're clear on when you are checking back in those cases. So it's a great way to kind of get people more involved. It's also good from the focus perspective, like Jen said, to change around who's leading your meetings, because then people can start to appreciate what that role actually means to facilitate virtually. I'm also a big one too. I found an app that I can put into Zoom that allows you to pick random numbers or put in names there, so that when we have questions, it just randomly can call on people, but it's visual for everybody. And they know they have to be paying attention then, because it's this little like bouncing dice in the app that comes up with people's names on it. It's pretty fun. We've kind of made a joke and a game out of it, but it really forces people to make sure that they're paying attention moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I believe my first grader has his name on a popsicle stick in a jar, and that's how the teacher calls on people.
I like that. I'll have to try that.
And something else to add is, you set clear priorities and you've asked for something once. Well, you have to ask for it again, right? By asking for it, you're demonstrating that something is important, right? If you ask for it once and they don't do it, it's just reinforcing the fact that, oh, well, gosh, then I don't have to do this. You have to make sure that when something needs to occur frequently or it's really important, you're going to have to ask maybe a couple times to demonstrate that it is important. While that sounds annoying and obnoxious, it's true.
100%. 100% there. Now on to one of my favorite subjects, accountability, which was an issue before COVID. It's not just because of COVID. It's so funny because this is the last step even of ADKAR, our change management concepts that we use, that reinforcement piece. Accountability is essentially reinforcement, and that is making sure that all the work gets done. Yes, in a perfect world, you could give direction, you could delegate, the team could be working on something and magically it just gets completed. But it's our role to ensure accountability to make sure those things get completed. Now, in order to make sure that those things get completed, we have to ensure we are over communicating, that those expectations crystal clear, deliverables crystal clear, timelines documented. People will know when you're asking them to jump in and work with them. The lack of opportunity that we have now to go and observe people to make sure that they've got heads down, to make sure that work or progress is being made, that has essentially been pushed to the side. So any benefit we may have had from the little amount of accountability work we may have been doing to just check on people and observe has now been taken away. So we do have a big role in this to help make sure that we are holding people accountable. And by nature, people do want to be held accountable. They want to share with you what they got done. They want to celebrate those successes. They want to talk about what they got completed. They want to share that with others. They don't just want to be reprimanded if they didn't get it completed. So make sure that you're allowing them to share on the successes that they're actually getting done. So because we can't bump into people in the hallway anymore, we're not running into them in the conference rooms or in the kitchens, we want to make sure, again, that you're having that regular weekly contact with each team member. And sometimes that happened ad hoc in the office environment. Now you're going to have to make sure that we schedule that. So we talked about a regular scheduled one-on-one earlier in the presentation. If you are one of those people who doesn't want it scheduled like that, you want to just have it casually bump in to people, they can still make it feel like it's bumped in. You still have to put the time on your calendar. So if you're anything like me, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get to that tomorrow. Oh yeah, I'll get to that tomorrow. I've got this other stuff I need to do. And then it's 5 o'clock on Friday and I still haven't done it. And then I realize I didn't check in with those 2 employees this week. So I need to go back and ensure that it's in my calendar for the following week. And it can just be a drop-in. They don't have to know that we scheduled that drop-in those cases. Just make sure you are over communicating and talking with your team. And then also, if you can, share specific feedback on why, how, what they can do, what was great, and maybe what they can do better in those cases. So instead of just saying, yeah, that was good, give them, hey, this was great because you really went into detail in this aspect. And I found that to be incredibly helpful because it helped me make this decision over here. Give them the feedback of why and what they are doing so that they can know where they need to continue, can keep doing what you've asked them to do. And if there's stuff that you're not finding valuable, don't waste their time on it. Make sure from an accountability perspective, you are holding yourself accountable, and they are essentially, in that case, being able to stop doing the stuff that you might not find valuable. So during these one-on-ones that you have with them, figure out, what do you need to work on? What are the milestones? When do you need to get them done by? And when can they expect you to check back in? People want to be able to give that feedback back and forth. So ensuring accountability, one of my favorites. It doesn't stop just because we're not in the office anymore. So some of the things to look out for then. Now this also is a little bit more difficult, which is why the camera and the video is so important, is to think about what type of stresses are people experiencing today now that they are working from home. It was interesting when we started to give some surveys out on things people were worried about from a top 5 perspective of working remotely. Social isolation from family and friends. They were missing their coworkers, getting regular exercise. Staying productive was way down in the list. They were not worried about that. They were more worried about the social aspect of this. So now that we know that our work from home allows us a little bit more flexibility, what do you need to look out for as a leader to make sure that people are doing okay? So think about, for each person that you're working with on your team, what does stress look like? What does it sound like? And what action will you take when you see it? So that when it does pop up, you're not like, oh shoot, how do I deal with it in this case? So it might be sitting down with your team to say, hey, I just want to make sure that I'm supporting you in the best way that I possibly can. What's stressing you out about working from home right now? What can we make sure that we're doing to help make things go easier for you? These are the types of conversations, one, which can really help you with instilling trust, but two, will also help you as a leader make sure from the accountability and focus perspective, you're doing what they need them or need you to be able to be doing for them in those cases. And again, as Jen talked about, maybe it is just that social aspect of it. Maybe you can figure out ways to meet with them one-on-one outside of the office. If you can meet up for a drink outside, meet up for lunch on a patio somewhere, and just make sure that it's safe to ensure that they're getting what they need to deal with their new home life and work schedule in these cases. Jen, you want to add anything on this one?
I think that the big one I want to add is the whole, especially with distress and just stress in general.
Yeah.
You know, again, like an example I'll give you and might resonate if you've got people on your team who have kids who had to pick up technology, who had to go sit in line at a high school on a specific day and time because of their last name. And had I been in an office atmosphere, right, this would have been very stressful for me because I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know how smooth it's going to go. I'm away from work for X amount of time. But knowing that your leader says, just go, don't worry. You don't need to take vacation time. Just get that done. It allows people, and I'm speaking from, you know, my own life, is that it just allows you, it's okay. No one's watching me and worried that I'm wasting time and you know, skipping work. No, once I get that, you know, piece of technology picked up, I can then go back and focus on work, right? Versus just being stressed about it and giving people that freedom. And sometimes they might know the freedom's there, but you need to remind them, hey,
Exactly.
don't worry. You got to leave early because your kid needs to be picked up. Go. Don't worry about work. You've got some Zoom call, like reminding them that it's okay. And as you as a leader, being okay with it, right? Not just, that's big, right? It's a big dynamic, but it's so huge for making them productive in work.
Absolutely. It's funny, in the survey that we had given out to one of the teams, we asked both the top rated need for parents of school age children and people who were not having children or did not have children at home. And the number one thing in both categories was not access to technology, was not stress and anxiety. It was flexibility from their leader in both cases. So people who had children and people who didn't, was flexibility in the situation.
Again, I said it before, remind them that they are adults and they can make decisions.
Yes.
Go, let them, because they're going to forget and they're going to stress out for no reason, which leads us to our next thing, next slide, which is stop, start, and continue. What, as a leader or a peer, right, or employee, what would be good for you to stop doing, right? A task-oriented one is huge. Focusing on outcomes, freaking out, it accomplishes nothing. Just ask my kids about me. And making assumptions, ask questions. So again, looking at that start column, what in here would be valuable for you to start doing? You know, take a look at yourself. Am I inspiring or am I leading by fear? Focusing on outcomes, asking questions, and just take a deep breath and chill out. We're all in this together. No one loves the situation, but it is what it is. And let's all be successful and help each other. Again, which plays into the fact that we're on a journey, right? We're revolutionizing the workplace right now. In a year from now, it might be hybrid models. I don't know what that hybrid model for sure is, and it's going to ebb and flow, right? As company needs change and, you know, outside needs change, we need to be flexible. And that's where it's really key that we want to make sure that your teams have the skills and you have the skills to help reinforce, create the excitement, generate motivation, you know, and ensure accountability in all of this. So we're super excited that this gives us another reason to talk about competencies and coaching and mentoring. And again, just to look back at the 5 areas that we talked about, you'll be getting this in, we'll be sending out an email that will include the slides, and then also this is an additional handout. Right, Julie?
Yes, they will. They'll get this and a link to the recording as well.
Okay, perfect. And then ask yourself, right? So as a company, have you defined your work or your hybrid policy? Have you invested in people, process, structure, technology?
Mhm.
Have you explained what winning is? Is it different? I guess another thing to ask, did you know what winning was before this all happened? Well, if you didn't, now is a fantastic time to figure it out, and communicate it crystal clear, and provide leaders and teams methods to be successful. So if you haven't done any of that, now's a fantastic time to start. And if you have, is it working? Does it need to be adjusted? Is there a different strategy you need to take? And we're here. If you love what you heard and you want more, we obviously couldn't share everything. Here's my open slide. But really, we want to help. We love this stuff. If you don't know where to start, please reach out. We can customize anything to your needs. Free discovery call. It can't hurt. And we want to help with retention. We want to help with motivation. We want to help with, your teams outperforming results, and productivity and excitement, right? We love when these things happen, and we love to be part of those wins. And so Julie just scheduled our October webinar.
Yes, for anybody who wanted to know about coaching. So we talked a little bit about it during our call today. But our October webinar, October 28th from 2 to 2:45, is going to be on coaching. So what is it? Why would you do it? And why would I want to do it? And I will tell you, it says straight on there, I thought the same thing until I actually got my own coach just over a year ago, and it absolutely changed my life. And for any of you who watch Billions, I loved Wendy on that show, and I absolutely wanted to be her until later in the seasons, and then it just kind of got weird. But it's part of what inspired me to do what I'm doing now with this case. So we're just going to spend a little bit of time during that webinar to understand what coaching is, what coaching isn't, how it's different from consulting and therapy, who might make the best candidate for coaching, and then how do you match yourself up with a coach. And then what does a typical engagement look like? Because I know as I'm talking with people, as I'm going through my certification process, I get stopped by a lot of people and they ask all of these questions. So I figured, why don't we just contain it into one webinar and you can ask all of your questions. It will be much more of an interactive webinar where you can submit questions. You can ask a ton of questions as we go through. We'll do chat on it to make sure that we're answering your questions as we go, and probably raffling off a free coaching session with somebody, which we'd love to have you on.
I want to add on to this. I had a monthly catch up with someone I worked with a long time ago. And she said, in part of her development plan, and she was an individual contributor, she did not have a team. Her leader gave her a coach to meet with almost once a month. And she said it was transformational. Mm-hmm. And so as the individuals on this webinar think about, right, again, coaches aren't just for CEOs and board members and presidents, they're for anyone. And they don't just have to be for the brightest and best. Yeah. Right? They can be for anyone who wants to be a fantastic contributor to your company. So I'm super excited about this, Julie.
It'll be fun. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm stoked. So with that being said, we got a couple questions. I'll go ahead and answer. We'll answer one if that's okay.
That sounds good.
So this one is I have a leader who is super task oriented, and it comes off as micromanaging. How do I switch them to be better at focusing on results?
All right. I love this question. I always joke that Jen stacked that deck because that is me. I am a task-oriented person, and it's one of those situations where that person may not even know that they're doing that. So the first step I would say in that conversation, and I would ask the question of what steps have you taken already to address it with that leader, and help them understand how that might come off or might feel in this different environment, and start seeing if, hey, do you think we could brainstorm together on maybe some ideas to get you the information that you need in a way that works for everybody in this new situation. So I always recommend in those cases, make sure that you have that conversation first, because people may not even realize they're doing it in those cases. Good question.
Mm-hmm. And we do have time for one more. What about someone who doesn't excel at communicating well in the office?
And that one, Jen.
And now being remote is exaggerating their lack of ability in this area.
I know nobody like that.
I've worked with several of them. And just to start an answer is not one size fits all, right? We need to understand why this person didn't excel at communicating. Did they listen? Who are they communicating to? What are they communicating? And especially if it's viewed that they're not communicating well, what is it? Is it feedback? Is it goals? Is it company information about policies? Is it just saying good job every once in a while? I think that it's really important to look at what actually isn't being communicated well. And again, back to what Julie said, having that one-on-one conversation, and understanding who the customer is in those situations. And yes, the person who doesn't excel might have to get uncomfortable and try a new strategy or method to help with their communication. It might not be super smooth in the end, but it'll definitely be better than probably where it is right now.
Absolutely.
So thank you, everyone. This was super fun. This was the fastest hour of my day. We definitely enjoy putting these together and inviting everyone in our networks to join. So if you loved it, obviously share it with people. If you have questions or you want to learn more about us, please reach out. We're happy to schedule a call. Or if you want something different, we probably have something in our back pockets that we can put together for you.
Yeah, or if you have fun topics you want us to cover in some of our upcoming webinars. We're putting together our schedule for 2021, which seems crazy. But if there's things you want us to talk about in 21, let us know. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Thinking of the future, Lauren's graduating in 2033.
Oh, good Lord.
My 5-year-old, so.
Okay, I'll be retired by then. Thank you.
I will not be. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Please, again, reach out with questions. You have our contact info, and we'll be getting a wrap-up email to you in the next 24 hours. So, everyone, have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.